boot stepped down off the iron train step. A slim white cane tapped the wet platform once. The boot did not move again. The woman on the cane turned her face toward the noise of the depot and waited. Nobody walked up to claim her. The conductor frowned and looked at his pocket watch. A station boy started to roll her trunk back toward the baggage car. Then a tall man at the far end of the platform stopped mid-stride. His long coat was wet at the shoulders. His scarred hand was already half lifted to wave the boy off. He had ridden 2 days down out of the high country to meet a quiet widow named Mary Whitfield, and the slim woman standing alone on the planks was not Mary, and she was not a widow, and her eyes did not move when he stepped into her light. His name was Caleb Hollies, and in the next 8 seconds he made the first quick decision of his life in 8 years. Stay with me on this one. 8 winters before that platform, Caleb Hollies had been a different shape of man. He had been a cavalry farrier, a horseshoer with arms like wagon braces, married to a freckled girl named Sarah, and the father of a brown-haired baby called Annie. He had a soddy on the lower meadow then. He had a milk cow. He had Sunday clothes. He had laughter that came out without him deciding. Then he took a 4-day freight run down to the rail spur, and when he came back, the chimney of his own house was cold, and the door was open, and the doctor was sitting on his porch step with his hat in his hands. Fever? Both of them. He buried his wife and his daughter in the same hour, in a single grave because the ground was already half frozen and the gravedigger was tired. He did not speak again for 9 months. When he finally did, it was to a packhorse, and the packhorse did not answer. He moved up the mountain. He left the soddy to a neighbor who let it fall in. He built a cabin at 6,000 feet in a notch above a spring, 2 miles up a switchback trail from the copper camp at Black Pine. He built it himself, log by notched log, and he did not ask for help. The cabin had 1 room, 1 window, 1 stove, 1 bed, and 1 chair. He kept 11 mules for hire, freighting ore and lumber down to the rail spur. He kept 3 dogs. He kept a rifle on 2 pegs above the door. He kept his wife's wedding band in a tin box under the floorboards, and he never took it out. The men in the copper camp called him the hermit. They did not call him that to his face. To his face they called him Mr. Hollies, and they paid him in coin and not in scrip, because his mules were the only string in the valley that did not lose a load on the bad switchback at Devil's Elbow. He nodded to people. He did not converse. He went to no church and no saloon and no Sunday dance. He bought his coffee and his flour at the camp store on the first Tuesday of each month, and he did not stay for the gossip. But the loneliness was not killing him fast. It was killing him slow. And a slow killing is the worst kind, because you can feel it doing its work and you cannot decide when it ends. By his 40th year, he had started talking to the stove. By his 41st year, he had started talking to his dead wife. By his 42nd year, he had sat down at the small pine table in the cabin one rainy April night and written a letter on a piece of brown butcher paper. He wrote it to a Pittsburgh matchmaker, whose advertisement he had cut out of a 6-month-old newspaper. The advertisement promised quiet widows of good Christian character for honest frontier men of modest means. He wrote that he was 42 years old. He wrote that his cabin had 1 room and a tight roof. He wrote that he did not drink. He did not write about Sarah. He did not write about Annie. He wrote that he would pay the agency fee in cash on arrival. He sealed the letter. He put it in the leather pouch on his mule's saddle. The next first Tuesday, he carried it down the mountain himself. 2 months passed. He almost forgot he had sent it. Then a return letter came, on cream-colored paper, in a clean hand. The woman was named Mary Whitfield. She was 36. Her late husband had been a foreman in a Lancaster brick kiln. She had no children. She could read scripture and keep a chicken house. She would arrive by the Denver and Rio Grande on the 17th of October. She enclosed a small tintype. The tintype showed a round-faced woman with a steady mouth. Caleb put the tintype on the pine table and looked at it for an hour. Then he turned it face down. The 17th of October was 3 weeks away. He started cutting extra firewood. He bought a second tin cup at the camp store. He did not tell anyone why. He rode down the mountain on the morning of the 17th in his cleanest shirt. His mules were stabled at the spur. He stood at the far end of the depot platform because he did not want the staring. He watched the train come in around the curve, breathing black smoke into a cold gray sky. 3 passengers stepped down. 2 were drummers with sample cases. The third was the slim woman with the cane. The drummers walked past her without looking. The conductor checked his pocket watch. The station boy started to roll her trunk back. And Caleb Holly stopped breathing. He crossed the platform in 12 long steps. The slim woman heard him coming and turned her face toward him but not at him. He saw then up close that her eyes were the color of river ice with no pupil shape to them. Blind. He saw the small brass tag on her travel satchel. It read in stamped letters, Esther Vance, ward of Allegheny County Charitable Asylum. It did not say Mary Whitfield. It did not say widow. Behind her, the agency man was hurrying down the platform with a leather portfolio under his arm. He was a small man in a city hat with sweat already on his upper lip, even in the cold. He started talking before he reached them. He said there had been a small substitution. He said Mary Whitfield had withdrawn her acceptance at the last moment. He said the agency had elected, in the interest of fulfilling Mr. Holly's contract, to send an equally suitable candidate who was already prepared to travel. He said the matter could be resolved cleanly. He said he had a return ticket in his portfolio and a replacement candidate already corresponding from Wheeling, and if Mr. Holly's would simply sign the form of refusal, the agency would absorb the inconvenience and send Miss Vance back east on the eastbound at 4. Esther Vance did not flinch when he said her name to a stranger like she was not standing there. She tilted her face very slightly toward Caleb. She did not speak. Caleb looked at her opaque eyes and at her gray wool scarf and at the worn leather of her satchel, and the agency man kept talking, and the station boy kept rolling the trunk, and the conductor kept looking at his watch. Caleb did not sign the form. He took the satchel from the station boy. He set it down by Esther's boot. He told the agency man, in a voice he had not used on a stranger in 8 years, to keep walking. The agency man's mouth opened. Caleb said it a second time lower. The agency man kept walking. The station boy stopped rolling the trunk. The conductor stopped looking at his watch. Caleb crouched down a little so his voice was at her level and not above her. He told her his name. He told her where she was. He told her there had been a misunderstanding she did not cause. He told her she could stay the night at the camp boarding house at his expense while they sorted it out, or she could come with him up the mountain to the cabin where she had been promised a home, and he would not lay a hand on her, and the choice was hers, and he would not be offended either way. Esther Vance asked him one question. She asked him if the cabin had a stove. He said yes. She asked him if the stove drew well. He said it did. She picked up her cane. She held out her free hand a few inches in front of her, palm down. He took it gently. He led her off the platform, past the agency man, past the drummers, past the staring loaders at the freight house. The whole depot watched them go. Nobody said anything out loud. 2 miles up the switchback in the cold gray afternoon, with the mules walking ahead and her hand at his elbow, Caleb Hollies realized he was breathing again, and he had no idea when he had started. The first 3 days at the cabin were not the romance of a Sunday paper story. They were quiet, careful work. She learned the 8 steps from the bed to the stove. She learned the 4 steps from the stove to the door. She learned where the water bucket sat and where the woodbox was and which board on the porch creaked. He did not move the furniture for her. He told her he had thought about it and decided she would learn the cabin faster if the cabin stayed itself. She agreed. She said it the way a woman agrees with a man she does not yet know. Polite. Watching with her ears. On the 4th morning, she asked him about the tin box under the floorboards. He had not told her about it. She had heard the loose board when he stepped on it the night before. She had heard She said yes, as if she had been told a story she already knew the shape of. He understood then that she had her own tin box, and that he would learn it when she was ready. On the seventh day, the mine foreman came up the trail. His name was August Mott. He was the chief foreman at the Black Pine Copper Works. He was a broad-shouldered man in a heavy duster with a pocket watch chain across his vest and a deputy's badge pinned inside the coat, because the camp had no real sheriff, and the company had elected to fill the gap with its own. He rode up alone that first time, smiling, a bottle of whiskey in his saddlebag. He said he had heard Mr. Hollies had taken a bride, and he had come to offer his congratulations. Caleb did not invite him in. Mott stayed on the porch. Esther stayed inside by the stove listening. Mott talked for 15 minutes about pleasant things. The weather, the price of copper, the Methodist Circuit rider's schedule. Then he turned to the real reason. He said the company surveyors had been up the ridge that week. He said the cabin sat on top of the cleanest spring in the valley. He said the company was prepared to pay $600 in cash for the deed and the water rights, which was a fair price, and a generous price, and a price that would let Mr. Hollies and his new bride relocate to a comfortable house in the lower town with a real doctor nearby for the lady's condition. He used the word condition like a small knife. Caleb listened to the whole pitch without speaking. When Mott was done, Caleb said the spring was not for sale, the cabin was not for sale, his wife was not a condition, and the trail back down was the same trail Mott had ridden up. Mott smiled wider. He said he would be back. He rode off whistling. That night Caleb climbed up on the cabin roof and tarred the seams. The first storm of the season was coming. He could feel it in the wind off the ridge. He worked by lantern. When he came down, he washed his hands in the rain barrel, sat on the porch step with a tin cup of coffee, and listened to Esther humming an old Pennsylvania hymn through the open door. The mules dozed in the lean-to. The dogs lay across the porch. For the first time in 8 winters, the cabin felt full, and the man on the step did not have to talk to a stove. 3 days later, the first storm came 2 weeks early, the way they sometimes do in the high country. It came in the afternoon as wet snow, and turned by sundown into hard, dry snow on a hard north wind. Caleb brought the mules into the lean-to. He brought the dogs inside. He banked the stove. He moved the water bucket close to the stove so it would not freeze. Esther tied a wool shawl around her shoulders and sat by the window even though she could not see the snow against it, because she said she liked to feel the cold of the glass on her cheek. They ate beans and corn bread by lamplight. They did not say much. They did not need to. Around midnight the wind reached its full voice, and a young gray wolf, half-starved, came down off the ridge and tried to dig under the woodshed door. The dogs went off like rifles. Caleb pulled on his coat. He told Esther to stay by the stove. He stepped out into the snow with the rifle and a lantern, and the dogs roiling around his legs. The wolf was already running. He let it run. He fixed the door. He came back in. He stamped the snow off his boots. He hung the rifle on the pegs. He sat down at the table. Esther reached across and put her hand on his cold sleeve. She did not say anything. He sipped his coffee. The wind quieted by morning. The cabin held. The mules were fine. The dogs were tired. The roof did not leak. He climbed up at first light and nailed the last loose shingle back. He came down. He washed his hands in the rain barrel. He sat on the porch step with a tin cup of coffee while Esther hummed inside. Hooves on the trail. 3 riders. Coming up at a hard trot in the new snow. August Mott in the lead in his duster, with the deputy's badge on the outside of his coat this time. 2 camp toughs behind him. One had a shotgun across his saddle. The other had a long ledger book. Mott called him by his old cavalry rank as he came up. He called him Sergeant Hollies, in a voice that was meant to remind the whole mountain who the company had been looking up in old Army records. Caleb set the tin cup down on the porch step. He did not stand. The dogs stood. The three riders stopped at the edge of the dooryard. Mott smiled the same wide smile. He said he had brought the deed papers and the cash, and he had also brought, he was sorry to say, some news about Mr. Hollies' new bride that the company felt obliged to share, as a courtesy, before the wedding was made formal at the circuit rider's next visit. He nodded at the man with the ledger book. The man with the ledger book started reading. If you are still with me, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you want the rest of these mountain stories. We have a lot of winter left. The ledger book contained, the man read, a transcript of a complaint sworn out by the Allegheny County Charitable Asylum and forwarded by wire to the company office. The complaint stated that Miss Esther Vance, formerly of the asylum, had been substituted for a contracted bride named Mary Whitfield by an agent of the matchmaking firm, that the substitution had been made without the knowledge or consent of the receiving party, that the substituted candidate had been a ward of the asylum since the age of 14, that she had been blind from birth, and that the asylum, on reflection, wished to recall the candidate to its care, citing concerns about her ability to function as a frontier wife. Mott did not interrupt the reading. When the man with the ledger book was done, Mott folded his hands on the saddle horn and said it was a sad business. He said the company was prepared, in light of these new facts, to revise its earlier offer. He said the company would now pay $800 in cash. He said the company would, in addition, cover the cost of returning Miss Vance to Pennsylvania in a comfortable berth with a paid attendant. He said all Mr. Hollies had to do was sign the deed and step aside, and the matter would be closed cleanly, and the church record would never have to show the name Hollies next to the name Vance. He smiled. He waited. Caleb stood up. He did not raise his voice. He told Mott to ride down the mountain and tell the company that the spring was not for sale, the cabin was not for sale, and the woman inside was not a candidate. Mott stopped smiling. The tough with the shotgun lifted it slightly. Caleb looked at the shotgun. He looked at the tough. He said in the same low voice that if any man in the dooryard pointed a weapon at the door of his cabin, that man would not ride down the trail he had ridden up. The dogs were silent now, the way dogs go silent when they have already decided. Mott put his hand flat on the air, palm down, the way a man calms a horse. He said there was no need for that. He said he was a reasonable man. He said the offer would stand for 1 week. He said after 1 week the company would have to consider other remedies, including a review of Mr. Hollies' freighting contract with the company store, which represented, he believed, the bulk of Mr. Hollies' annual income. He said he hoped Mr. Hollies would consult with his new bride and arrive at a sensible decision. He turned his horse. The three riders went back down the trail at a walk. Caleb stood on the porch with the dogs until the last hat dropped out of sight below the lower switchback. He went inside. Esther was standing by the stove. She had heard every word. She had wrapped her hands in her shawl. She said before he could speak that he should take the money. She said she had heard the ledger and she had heard the truth in it, and the asylum was within its rights, and the company was within its rights, and he had only known her 10 days, and there was no good reason for him to lose his freight contract and his roof and his name over a woman he had not chosen. She said it without shaking. Caleb listened. When she was done, he sat down on the chair across from her. He told her that the asylum had not given her a choice, and the agency had not given him a choice, and the company was not giving either of them a choice now, and the only choice left on the mountain was his, and he had already made it the second she stepped off the train. He told her he was going down to the camp the next morning, and he was going to settle the matter publicly, in front of the agency man if the agency man was still in town, and in front of August Mott, and in front of any churchgoer in the camp who cared to watch. He told her she did not have to come. She said she would come. The next morning was cold and bright. The snow on the switchback was crusted, and the mules went slow. Caleb rode his big gray. Esther rode behind him on a quiet brown mare he had borrowed for her, her cane lashed to the saddle and her hand on the small of his back to feel his balance. They came into the camp at mid-morning. The whole street stopped. The agency man, it turned out, had not left town. The company had paid him to stay. He was standing in front of the camp store in his city hat, the leather portfolio under his arm, looking small. August Mott was standing on the boardwalk in front of the company office in his duster, with the deputy's badge on the outside. The man with the ledger was beside him. The tough with the shotgun was beside him. A half-dozen camp wives had drifted out of the boarding house. The blacksmith had stopped his hammer. The circuit rider, who happened to have arrived the night before for his monthly rounds, was standing on the boarding house porch with his Bible open in one hand and his coffee in the other. Caleb helped Esther down off the brown mare. He set her cane in her hand. He led her by the elbow to the middle of the street, between the boardwalk and the camp store, where everybody could see. He turned her toward the agency man first. He spoke loud enough to carry the length of the street. He said his name. He said hers. He said he had received 2 letters from the matchmaking firm, and that both letters had been signed by the agency man standing in front of the store. He said the first letter had promised a widow named Mary Whitfield. He said the second letter, which had arrived 3 days before the train, had contained, folded inside it, a small piece of paper the agency man had clearly not meant to send, a piece of paper in the firm's own hand, that listed the actual candidate by name and by condition and by ward status, with the note, asylum eager to place, fee waived to firm. He said he had read that piece of paper at his pine table at the cabin. He said he had read it 3 times. He said he had ridden down to the depot on the 17th of October, knowing exactly who would be stepping off the train, and knowing exactly what the agency man would try to do when he saw a mountain man's face. He said he had decided at his own table, the night before he rode down, that he would take her anyway. He said he had decided it without seeing her face and without hearing her voice. He said he had decided it because a man who has buried his wife and his daughter does not get to be choosy about who knocks on the door of the second life, and because the asylum had no more right to keep her than the agency man had to swap her, and because a person is not a candidate, and a wife is not a condition, and a cabin is not a price. He turned to August Mott. He said the spring was not for sale. He said the cabin was not for sale. He said the freight contract was the company's to cancel if the company wanted to cancel it, and he would haul ore for the smaller mine over the pass if the Black Pine Works closed its books to him, and his mules would still eat. He said one more thing. He said if any man on the boardwalk, with or without a badge, ever rode up his trail again with a weapon meant for the door of his cabin, that man would answer for it in the only court the high country had ever recognized. He said it flat. He did not raise his voice. The tough with the shotgun looked at his boots. Mott's mouth moved, but no sound came out of it for a long moment. The circuit rider closed his Bible quietly on his thumb. The camp wives on the boarding house porch did not move. The agency man's portfolio slipped a little under his arm, and he caught it. Esther stood beside Caleb with her free hand in his and her opaque eyes turned toward the sound of his voice, and the snow on the street caught the sun, and the whole street understood all at once that the mountain man had not been outmaneuvered. He had been ahead of every one of them since the day the second letter came. The impossible thing was not that he had picked her up off the platform. The impossible thing was that he had already chosen her at his own table, in his own cabin, by his own lamp, with no witness but the stove, before the train ever crossed the divide. The agency man stepped back. Mott stepped back. The circuit rider stepped forward and asked, quietly, whether the parties wished to be married in the boarding house parlor that afternoon, with the camp as witness. Caleb looked at Esther. Esther smiled. She said yes. The first true snow came on the night of the wedding and stayed. The valley turned white from the rail spur all the way up to the ridge above the cabin. The company did not cancel the freight contract. The company never came up the trail again. The agency man took the eastbound at 4 the next afternoon and was not seen in the valley again. August Mott was reassigned by the company office in Denver before the new year. The man with the ledger took a clerk's job in the lower town and did not look Caleb in the eye when they passed on the street. The tough with the shotgun moved on to a different camp in the spring. The circuit rider made the cabin a regular stop on his monthly rounds, and he always took his coffee on the porch step, even in January, because he said the air up there cleared his sermon for him. Caleb mended a bridle on the pine table on a quiet evening in February. The stove drew well. The wind was small. Esther sat in the chair across from him with a raised print scripture book on her lap, her fingers moving slowly across the bumps. She read out a verse she liked, in a voice no louder than the kettle. He listened. He did not answer with a verse. He answered with a small piece of news. He told her, very simply, that he had taken the tin box out from under the floorboards that morning. He told her he had washed Sarah's wedding band in the rain barrel. He told her he had put the ring in the box on the high shelf above the stove, where the box would stay, with the lid open, where Annie's small hair ribbon could see the lamp at night. He told her he had not done it to put the past away. He told her he had done it to let the past sit at the table in the light, the way a person sits, not the way a wound sits. Esther reached across the table and put her hand on the back of his scarred hand. She said one word, the same word she had said on the fourth morning, quiet, like a story she already knew the shape of. Yes. Outside, the dog slept on the porch. The mules dozed in the lean-to. The spring above the cabin ran clean and dark under the snow. The smoke from the chimney went straight up into a cold black sky full of stars. A boot moved gently under the table, a slim cane leaned against the chair, and a tall bearded man in a long coat at last sat still in his own home, and breathed, and did not have to decide when the slow killing ended, because it had ended already on a wet platform, in the second a stranger's hand had reached out into the empty air and waited for his.